Hey everyone, this is Gary Kay, and I'm super excited about this. Is literally the first live AI session I think anyone in the industry has done. I don't think anyone else has done a live AI session. And look, there's no question that AI is started to have an impact on our business, but it is about to accelerate significantly. And we've got some big players here who are going to talk about this. And really, most importantly, this is geared towards you, the users, the people who are putting this stuff in, the people who are having to deal with this. And you are in a unique perspective. And depending on who your customers are inside your own organization, like obviously you're an end user of AV gear, but who depend on who you report to or depend on who your clients internally are, they could be more advanced in AI than even you are. And we find that a lot because it's rising from the bottom, meaning the youth are much more literate in AI than the rest of us. We're going to talk about that and a bunch of other things, but I want to bring on Tim Albright. Tim and I have been friends for many, many years in the industry. Thanks for doing this and hosting this event today on our platform.
Thanks so much. And yeah, we've started working together to kind of grow the industry, right? Rave has AV Buyers Club, which is 100% focused on IT managers and AV directors, and same thing with AV Nation. That is what our platform is wholly dedicated to. So this is kind of cool. So thanks so much for having me. Let's bring our other two guests on, Brad Hensey and Marion Corrigan. Welcome to you both.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Tim and Gary, always loved speaking with you two.
All right. Marion is, of course, from Microsoft, and Brad Hensey is from Crestron. We'll get to those folks in a second. Gary mentioned that the questions, we will take those at the end, but if you've got something and somebody's saying something, please write it on the right-hand side, and we will get to those as soon as we can. We're going to talk about a couple of things today. First and foremost, what exactly is the importance of AI? Quite frankly, in today's business, in today's higher education space, what is how important is AI? And it's not a question we're going to gloss over and go, oh, it's important, right, and move on. We're going to dig into that. Also, understanding the AI technology stack, and taking a look at all the parts and pieces that you and a lot of folks that are using it, and exactly how they're really leveraging AI. And then finally, we're going to take a look at the role of collaboration technology and AI, and how the two are kind of partnering and piecing together. Before we get started, though, I want to lay the groundwork, right? People say AI, and it has unfortunately has a potential of being a buzzword. And what I mean by that is you could go to McDonald's and they could say, oh, we use AI because it could be used as a marketing platform. But that's not what we're doing today. We're going to lay the groundwork. So Gary, really quickly, one of the things that folks talk about, and one of the terms that they throw out, is large language models, or LLMs. I've got my definition. I want to give you the chance here to talk about, from your perspective, what exactly is an LLM?
Well, first I want to mention, Tim, I think it's probably worth mentioning that for those that don't know, I teach advertising and branding at the University of North Carolina. And one thing, the reason why AI is so important is because anyone under the age of 25 is using it every single day.
Yep.
We, over the age of 25, and those of us over the age of 50, are definitely not using it every day. We kind of wish we were using it every day. We wish we understood sort of the everyday applications for AI. It reminds me a lot of the internet back in 1995, where the moment I found out about it, I was in on it. I was programming, I was building pages, and I was into it. And everyone that was 10 years older than me just didn't totally understand what I was doing or why I was doing what I was doing. It kind of reminds me of that, in that there's this technology that's sort of leaving a group of people behind because they're not paying attention to how much is affecting their everyday life. And students and in higher education have driven AI adoption much, much faster. And I'm going to give you 2 or 3 simple ways. Cheating. One of the issues that came up in universities was, oh my gosh, because we let students use open book, open notes kind of thing, when they want a question answered on a test, all they got to do is basically use AI to get the question answered, because AI doesn't just surf the internet. AI looks at all the layers of things that are connected to the internet and can go inside of PDF documents, and can go into videos, can go into podcasts, can go into anything that's posted or connected to the internet that is publicly available or potentially even privately available through hooks. and actually pull up that data. That is how an LLM works, basically, Tim, is that you sort of have these multi-layers that are there, and depending on what your application is, it's not flat. Now, an example of a flat AI would be the way that Alexa works when you say, hey, Alexa, what's the temperature in Chapel Hill, North Carolina today? That's like, people don't talk about that as AI, but that's a great example of AI because it's having to listen to what you're saying, to interpret what you're saying, in my case, an accent, and then giving you the information based on what you just asked for, specific to what you just asked for. That is flat search. That's a flat model. An LLM is where we're, and it's flat for Alexa because Amazon makes it easy, right? I mean, and of course, the result they're going to give you is Amazon beneficial, right? Yeah. Because they're a big company. An LLM is going to go much deeper than that. And what's really interesting about LLMs is that we can generate content really simply. So for example, you've probably seen these videos, Tim, where people have made videos from just talking to applications where they've said, hey, make me a video of a person walking on a futuristic looking beach, wearing pink shorts and a blue shirt and blonde hair, but the hair catches on fire. And it'll create a video and says, it'll come back and say, how long do you want it to be? 20 seconds. Okay. There's a product out there called Sora, S-O-R-A, that'll actually do that for you. That's using an LLM. It's looking at all the content that's out there and it's combining it together. So it's got to find a beach. It's got to find, pink shorts and a blue shirt. It's got to find all these elements. It's put them together. And that's basically how it works. That's the best way to describe it, Tim.
All right. So Brad, I want to bring you in and Maren on this. So from AI, right? LLM, and what are some of the common business challenges that businesses are facing when trying to incorporate AI into their business?
It's an excellent question. But I think that there are a lot of things that people are wrestling with. And look, we've seen customers wrestle with this in a variety of different ways, but some of those things include access to my private and confidential data. How do you make sure that remains private and confidential? Another is, how do you grant access to individual users and how do they gain access to it in other places? And then how can you also deliver a vertically focused application of AI to help them do a specific job, right? There are different needs within a marketing department versus a tech support department versus a QA department and an engineering department. And so I think all sorts of organizations are trying to address all of these challenges. And they're doing that right now by a lot of experimentation, at least what we're seeing. And some people are very out in the front and willing to take some of those risks. Others are ultra conservative. But that's a big part of some of these challenges that a lot of organizations are faced with as they embrace this. And that's not even to mention anything like regulatory things, right? That's looming, all of those kinds of questions. And so there are some big things that we're all wrestling with still at this moment.
Really quickly, side note before I get to you, Maren, some of the regulatory issues that Brad is mentioning is you've got HIPAA compliance, which working in the medical field. Financial institutions have their own set of compliances. Higher education has their own set of compliances. There's a HIPAA version for students where you have to protect their data.
It's called FERPA.
FERPA, and then I'm not going to get into the U.S. government and their set of rules and regulations because I don't know them all, but there are a lot, and it's a huge concern. Maren, from your perspective, what are some of the challenges of integrating AI into a business?
Well, I think you touched on a lot of them. I think Brad hit it right on the head. I think it's a lot of that data governance behind the scenes. So when Gary talks about these large language models, you've got like Microsoft Fabric and all of the data that you've got as a company. Do you want everybody to access that all the time? Probably not. So you've got to go into literally every single file that your company has, whether it be email, Outlook, chats, who knows, PowerPoints. You've got to label everything. And that's a big effort that everybody in the company needs to be trained on, of how do I properly label all of my documents and what does it mean to put it at general or high security. So you kind of have to do that effort first. And then second was Brad was, how do I give people access to these tools? Is it for everybody? Let's look at a day in the life and kind of give tools to the people in the right places. But to me right now, it's all about training and adoption. It's all good if you enable people and give them the license, but if they don't know actually how to use it, it's useless. And so I think having cohorts of people all around you that can share, like, hey, look at this prompt that I used, look what I got out of it. Those are all things that really help promote adoption and help people sort of learn. I will say for me, I had early access, but I'd say it took me at least 6 months to feel like it was ingrained in my everyday. So it's not an easy thing. It takes effort and it takes that growth mindset. So it's a company culture change as well, in my opinion.
So go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, what I was going to say is I think there's a solution here to accelerate all this, because what's interesting is a company like Microsoft has dumped a ton of capability in a very short period of time. Like Copilot has gone from just being this side project to driving the business. And if you weren't an early adopter of Copilot and you're only seeing it inside of Teams, you're missing huge opportunities to use it, right? I mean, like this Copilot could literally be your assistant to run your everyday business and run your everyday individual day, literally from your calendar to your reminders, to your emails, to your contacts. And so my suggestion would be, if we want a good outcome here, would be to create mentors in the organization that become coaches or there's the people that are evangelists in the organization. And it doesn't matter if they're using Copilot or the other brands that are out there. I mean, I think Copilot is by far the giant brand. I mean, because it's part of Microsoft, built into all the Microsoft tools now. I mean, like literally everything. And so you need to find people who are comfortable with it and have them make everyone else comfortable with it, because you're missing out if you're just doing things the old-fashioned way. It doesn't mean you can't do things the old-fashioned way. You're just literally missing out on a huge efficiency benefit that I think it's not just an AV related thing, it's a business related thing, but even in AV, it's a huge deal, because if you're not even using the functionality of AI with some of the stuff that Crestron has done and Microsoft has done specifically, you're missing out on a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So Maren and Brad, both Gary and Maren mentioned this, and Maren, we'll start with you. How do you identify those evangelists? How do you identify, and then how do you empower them to do what you suggested?
So we internally have a lot of course material. We have put weekly meetings on the calendar to just share. We do within chats, we have Copilot champions, just as Gary had said. So we evangelize them and then kind of create teams. We have newsletters every single week. We post on LinkedIn, and we try to do it in bite-sized pieces. Doing a 4-hour training is not something anybody enjoys, but if you follow me on LinkedIn, I put up, hey, do you want to learn how to create your own emoji? Cool. Let's show you how to do that. Little baby things that are fun to kind of teach people how to prompt and cut it up into bite-sized pieces. I think that's great. And put it in a context that they'll enjoy and have fun doing. So I think exactly that, creating teams, creating evangelists within every single persona, essentially. So we've got sellers, we've got somebody in HR. Let's share the different personas and how they gain benefits out of it. And I think that that's the best way to go about it.
And then do you find value in cross sharing, like you mentioned HR and marketing and sales? Do you find value in those groups of folks kind of cross sharing and see what they've learned, to see if maybe there's a spark there in another department?
Absolutely. I think in sales, I want to know about all of them, obviously. But even today, we had a company meeting where they shared, it was some radiology conference that took place in the US. And they talked about how this doctor went to a board meeting and they did a bunch of case reviews, and how she took all the notes from that board meeting and translated it into a PowerPoint and then taught a class the next day on it. I think those are real life scenarios. Obviously, it's radiology and it's a doctor, but that can translate to a lot of different users across different segments. So yes, I think it's important to share it across many contexts.
I want to mention something about that. That's a great example where you can literally take notes from a meeting or a conference you've been at and then put them inside of Copilot and have it create a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah.
Look, just because it can create a PowerPoint presentation doesn't mean that the person can present. And so therefore the fear about AI is basically mislabeled. And I think that has created a lot of negativity around AI from older people, quite honestly, is what I've seen. Even my own cohort of teachers at UNC, the older they are, the less likely they are to have adopted AI. And I think you'll find that because, it's just with any new technology. And I'm part of that, right? I represent the older group, so I feel fair to be able to say that. But so the thing is instead of entering this with fear, enter it with curiosity. Try it out. Just put the stuff in there and try it out. Now, with that in mind, the security issue is a big deal. Like, for example, Marion made a really big deal about how you have to go through and mark things that should not be public facing, what stuff is internal, that you really like stuff you stick on Slack that you just didn't think about when you put it on Slack. Is that really supposed to be public or not? Or would it benefit the public, and is it going to hurt us internally? And so I think the fear needs to be removed and move to curiosity and start trying things out. Okay, if it doesn't make a great PowerPoint presentation, fine, I'll use it. Do your own way, but you'll be surprised.
Yeah, I think from in my personal experience in using it, I think that as you embrace it and experiment with it, it actually removes a lot of the, like the monkeys on your back about getting work done, so you can get to the parts where you add real value and where you're excited. There have been a number of times when I've used it to start the outline of a presentation, and just that one step is always such a drag for me. And I always put it off to the last minute, and I used it just to create the outline for me. And that took off so much weight. And then I moved right into that creative phase. And it made it a better output, a better product, because it took that boring, terrible work off my plate. So I could focus on the more important stuff.
I want to hit something here because Gary alluded to it, but I don't think he said it out loud. That fear of AI is that it's going to take jobs, right? It's going to take your job, right? It's going to replace you. And what all three of these folks have illustrated is, no, it's not. It's going to make you, if you use it correctly and efficiently, better, right?
It's going to replace tasks. It's going to replace tasks that you do.
It's going to take a weight off of your shoulders, right? And we're going to get to how it does that. Gary, one of the phrases that I have encountered is an AI technology stack. I've been in the industry a number of years. I understand what a technology stack is generically, right? Whether that's, programming or app development. Right? So when we're talking about AI stack, what are we talking about?
It's the exact same thing, except imagine the AI. Well, you decide how much capability you want AI to have and how deep you want it to go, right? But it has the ability to be auto-generating, for lack of a better term. It's called generative AI, but where it's actually thinking on its own and it's actually creating on its own, but it's making some assumptions. Like, the best analogy I've been able to draw for my cohort internally is, how when you type into Google and you just do it, or Bing, and you do a search, and you're like, dang, the thing I was searching for came up as the third option, right? You're like, and I only typed in a word and a half. Well, that's exactly how AI works, right? This is basically making some assumptions. Now, what are the assumptions that it's making? It's looking at what you're doing. It's looking at what you just did on your computer. It's looking at what everyone else like you is doing right now in the world who's like you, right? And what they're searching for at the same time. And it's making some assumptions. That is a form of that's a really simple form of generative AI. We can go much deeper than that, but you have to have layers. You have to have this stack. And some of the questions that are important here, Tim, is, do we do it internally? We do it externally. Do we like a company like Microsoft? I can guarantee you they're doing it internally because they have so much to lose by making everything they do technologically external to the organization. Now, they also provide servers that everyone has access to, but I guarantee you they have their own set of servers that a tech stack, what you referred to, Tim, internally. And layered on top of that, they have AI that's now drilling down there and deciding what information based on private or public should I return, and then it can actually generate. So if you had the right kind of AI stack, the piece that would be taken out is what using the example Marion just said, is the PowerPoint would already been made for you. So this person went to the presentation, they recorded it, and then by the time they got back to their dorm room, their hotel room, whatever, Microsoft's already emailed them a PowerPoint presentation that was already made because they know that this person's going to want a PowerPoint presentation about it.
Yeah. And if I can add to that too, I think that we're still so early in this AI revolution. And as organizations wrestle with some of the challenges that we talked about, right? Data access, how do we grant access to individual users so that it can improve their job? And then how do we create these vertically focused kind of task specific type of agents that will require a broad set of tools and ways to get at that those AI capabilities. And so as organizations assemble this collection of tools to go and empower their employees, that AI stack becomes really important. Data will be a really important layer, but that data will be leveraged in a variety of different tools. If we pull it into our world, right, there is a point of view about the data in the utilization of products within different spaces, within a classroom, within a meeting room, right? That will go into this data store that then becomes important as you evaluate, where do I make my AV investments going forward? Now, that's really important for the AV and IT teams as they're making those investment decisions. But if that data is accessible in a secure way to other parts of an organization, say to education, the registrar's office can use that data in understanding, are we enabling minority groups with academic excellence because they're in classrooms with technology? Right? Those are the kinds of questions that a registrar's office would want to ask. And if data related to that was available there and the AI made it simple for them to get that data and interpret that and understand it so they could do their job better, that becomes hugely valuable. So that data layer becomes a really important part of that AI stack. But AV and IT, they have different tools built on top of that data than the registrar's office. And so that will be an interesting evolution of the way AI gets leveraged.
Yeah, and I want to give you I'm going to connect the dots between AV, if you don't mind, Tim. An example of that would be like, okay, you're redesigning all your classrooms, and you already know that you're not using document cameras enough to buy one for every single classroom because the AI kept track of your AI stack, kept track of who's using it, how often it was used, what it was used for, all that kind of stuff. You can do that with everything in a room, especially when you go AV over IP, right? Once everything's on the network, now we have the ability to manage everything, but also watch everything and then use that data whenever you want it. Because the problem with data today is there's just so much that who knows what to do with it. But if you are able to simply talk to it and ask those questions like you do Alexa, that's what Brad was just referring to, and Marion too, was it if you have a simple interface that literally just says, well, how often are we using document cameras in room 201? And boom, the information comes back. It's the exact same thing as asking Alexa the weather in Chapel Hill. It works exactly the same way, except one is using an internal stack and one is using the internet.
Mm-hmm. Marion, I want to hit on something here. Besides the resistance internally, right? What are some other common challenges businesses face when they're integrating AI into their, whether it's higher education or corporate space?
One that comes very top of mind is the sort of bring your own AI. Like if you turn your back and say, oh, this is too much, I don't want to give them access to the data. There are people that absolutely will just use ChatGPT themselves and generate their own notes. And then you risk even more of like, hey, they're going to take my data that's company and put it somewhere else that I don't control. I think that's an even greater risk. So I think that's something that should really be important. It's like, let's do it safely, maybe take it slow, step by step, but don't turn your back on it. And there's lots of ways to slowly incorporate it. Gary, we've talked a lot about Copilot, which is one way, but there are other things like we've got Teams Premium that has intelligent recap in it, but it's not exposing the whole stack. It's got the meeting recap feature. So it's almost like the agent that does a small bit of AI. So you can take it off in chunks through these Copilot agents. That's just going one by one into different parts of your company stack and providing that value and benefit without having to address the entire thing all at once. So I think it's just making sure you have a step-by-step approach to it and not turning your back and having a plan in place. I think the advice is probably to take it slow, but don't have that be, turn your back on the whole thing. Because I think once you get people exposed to it, you'll be surprised because there's a lot more use cases than you ever even thought of that end up coming up as super valuable.
Well, there's Microsoft data that show that across all generations of workers, 70+% of people are using their own AI tools, and they're bringing their own tools to work, because it does provide value. But as soon as you don't provide them a tool and they're out on their own, you have no idea where that's going. And there's such a tremendous proliferation of tools, that really becomes something that IT teams have to wrestle with. You have to provide an answer for that. These users want it. How can you provide them a path to one that's secure and that you can manage, right? Otherwise, they're going to go figure it out on their own.
Yeah, I guess the lesson is you have to have a policy. Yeah. And if we haven't forgotten to have a policy, now's a great time, because anyone that has an iPhone is walking around with a massive AI device right now that you don't, if you've activated it on the iPhone is just sitting there listening to you, and it's basically doing that for you. It's just waiting for you to ask for the prompt. And that may not be something that a company wants. In other words, that meeting may not be a public a meeting that you want to have any information made public, but the mere fact that you have the phone in your pocket means that data could, not necessarily would, but could actually get out there. So you need to have a policy. And I'm big on, I don't think it should be a policy of here's what not to do. It should be more of an open, curious policy. And then, but in the background of it, of course, protecting the organization and the people inside the organization.
And there's a couple pieces here from a structural standpoint, and I'm going to throw out some titles here, and whether you have it in your organization is kind of irrelevant. Figure out who that is. But this is a top-down decision, right? This is not something where me, Tim, who's an IT, person who services a server, can kind of make this decision and go, okay, at American Express, this is our policy. No, right? The CIO, the CTO, maybe even the CEO, right? Because here's the thing: Gary's right. It impacts, that policy impacts the entire organization. So you can create a groundswell from the bottom up, but this is something from the top down. You have to have some folks laying some groundwork and saying, be open, be curious, but these are the things that we expect, and these are the things that are okay to put inside Microsoft Copilot or what have you. So, Maren, really quickly before we move on, you said you made you used a phrase there, and I want to get a definition from you, because I've also heard this an awful lot. What is a Copilot agent?
Okay, so example, if you watched our most recent Microsoft Ignite, we've been talking about like this Teams Copilot, which is kind of another, let's say it's an assistant that's in your meeting that you're giving it tasks to do things for you. So we introduced the facilitator. It's essentially an agent within Copilot that you've brought into the meeting, that we are telling it to keep us on agenda, take a note of all the action items, and send out the recap, the notes, and the action items at the end of the call, and make sure that you give us reminders when we need to move on to the next topic. Like that would be an example of a agent that was created within Copilot. There are different ones that you can create. Like if you are like a customer service organization and you want to create a Copilot that helps answer questions based on all of the resolutions on customer calls, and it's going to automate some of that discovery and information so you can find answers faster. That would be another agent that you create that's grounded on all of your call data and all your resolution data. So that's one that I think is very helpful, because you're not using like a whole library of your entire database of information and the web. Like you're isolating a smaller data set and then having it do things on that data set. So it's a way to break it off in chunks and not apply it to your entire library of information.
All right, very cool. We're going to turn the page and focus a bit more on collaboration. UC, unified collaboration, and Brad, when it comes to collaboration technology, just a generic phrase here, why does it matter when we're talking about AI? Like how do those two worlds come together?
This is I think this is really important. Everything that we've been talking about in terms of the way individual people are bringing AI into their work and they're embracing it, the thing that's happening is that it's raising their expectations for when they go into a collaboration space. If I am used to sitting in my own home office, right, getting meeting transcription notes, all the benefit out of that, and then I go into a meeting space and meeting with people in person, I'm going to expect the benefits of having all that agent helping and facilitate that meeting. And so end users, those that are using the technology every day, those are their new expectations. In the same way that the iPhone and mobile devices raise the expectations for technology in B2B, right? That was a consumer device, and then that drove investments for B2B on a mobile phone. The AI consumer personalized AI tools will drive expectations for the needs around collaboration within those meeting spaces. And so we all have to be thinking about how do we meet and exceed those expectations and deliver on that. And so you need to have the equipment in the room that will deliver a great experience to enable things like Copilot, right? You need to be able to facilitate that. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is that AI embedded into devices can improve the experience for that solution, right? One of those that we talk about frequently at Crestron is the intelligent video experience. How do you make sure that the person speaking is framed accurately? You're following them around the room. They stand up and go to the whiteboard. You want to switch automatically to that. Don't make anybody in the room need to worry about that. Just let it happen. All that's enabled by computer vision and AI. And we've been making investments in there for quite some time. So the AI can improve the experiences of the technology, but then it can also enable these new AI tools like Copilot when it's deployed appropriately.
Hey, I want to mention one thing about that, because I think part of this that should be said, Tim, is that, by the way, that experience is really important, because you're online remote. You have those expectations. You go to an in-person meeting where there's nobody remote, that's the AI should still be doing its stuff, because you should still have the meeting notes. You should still have the framing of the meeting. You should still have the agenda person pushing the agenda, which can be AI, as Marion just said, with the agent. And all that should be available regardless of where you're meeting. So in other words, if you meet in the conference room where normally people join remotely, that should automatically happen. If you meet at the water cooler, that should automatically happen. That can happen, right? Because Microsoft enables that to happen. The Crestron tools are there in the meeting room, and then it's going to frame the person. You're still able to record that meeting, still able to have the access to the recording, and then take it to the next level. It can be simultaneously translated in any language in the world and sent to whoever needs to have a copy of it based on who is supposed to join the meeting. This is all stuff that is real world stuff that is available today from companies like Microsoft and Crestron.
No, Marianne, I want you to chime in here, because you mentioned the facilitator, you mentioned note taking. What other tools for collaboration does Microsoft have, either in Copilot or just in Teams in general?
Gosh, I don't even know where to start. I will say one that was kind of cool that we did announce at Integrate was the live language translation, which Gary, I don't know if you saw that, but if I was speaking to you all and you're all speaking in French and I don't know how to speak French, you could translate my voice into French in live real time, which is a really cool way to use AI. Another one is we showed whiteboarding, where we had a live whiteboard camera in the room, and it was able to use AI through that camera to basically translate what was written on the board and convert it into a table and insert it into the chat live in the meeting. So oftentimes that we take a picture of what's on the whiteboard and then send it to the chat, and then somebody's got to actually write it down and make it look pretty in a PowerPoint. Like that all was done seamlessly and automatically with AI. So those are meeting room scenarios. Others are proximity join. We've improved that, where we've got not only Bluetooth, but ultrasound technology, so that when you walk into the room, it knows that you're there, and it could say, hey, are you joining this meeting? Okay, I'm going to start that. So it's less of a workaround to try to invite that room to your meeting and then press it. And then the last one I'll say is Microsoft Places. We just announced GA a couple of weeks ago, and that's driving more meetings. Like essentially there's so many times that we don't know when to go to the office or who is there when we are there. So it's a way of knowing when to be in the office and suggesting the real-time collaboration moments with those that are there in proximity to you, suggesting the right meeting rooms based on your needs for that meeting, and then maybe freeing up those rooms automatically, based on some of those sensor technologies. If somebody didn't show up, it can free it for somebody else to do that. Or if you've got a recurring meeting and that room, let's say you move it from Tuesday to Wednesday because somebody's got a conflict that week, turns out the room's not available on the Wednesday, it can automatically go and select a room that is similar, that's got all the right technology features and can accommodate the same size audience without you having to go and search one by one, which is a huge annoying pain in the butt, I would say. So those are just some examples of a few things that we've recently introduced that are incorporating AI into the meeting experience.
Gary, one of the things that in corporate world we call it, unified communications and collaboration. Education, we call it remote learning. I still don't know why we differentiate the two, but in essence, it's the same thing. So from higher education, what are some of the tools that AI can help and facilitate? You and Marion and Brett have already highlighted a couple of them, but from maybe there's a education specific one that you could think of.
I mean, there's so many, and Brad even actually mentioned one that is not AI or it's not AV related, but is super important. The registrar office need to know who's going where, and what's happening. Yeah. If you have, these schools, public universities are required to follow ADA. So if you have a student that's going to enter a class that, for example, is in a wheelchair, that information has to get there, and we have to figure out, does this classroom, because by the way, in my campus, we have classrooms that have been there 150 years in buildings that don't have ramps. We can't put a class in that. We can't put that student in that class at that moment in time, right? So that kind of information is a good example of how we're connecting the dots that used to be done manually. It can be done completely automatically by embracing AI rather than being fear of AI. Within the classroom, it's stuff like it's really actually a lot easier in higher education, for that matter, and even K through 12 than it is in the business world. And I'll tell you why, because we have our classroom schedules done for the entire semester, and it almost rarely never changes. So every Tuesday, Thursday at 2:30 p.m., I have Medio 137. At 5 p.m., I have Medio 371. I know which classroom it's going to be in every day of the week. The only exceptions to that are when there's holidays. So we actually can program the cameras, we can program the recording, we can program the streaming, we can program the archiving of it, the translation, everything that needs to be done can be automatically programmed. And since it's all on the network, we can send that content wherever we want to send it afterwards. So I think higher education has a little bit easier. I will say that one of the things that's happening in education is we are jamming the rooms full of cameras now. We don't have to worry about, can we put a camera in this room or not? Because when you sign up to join the college, you basically are signed up to be on camera. So we're putting cameras all over the place, and we're doing exactly what Brad was referring to. We're using AI to follow them around the room. The professors don't have to learn how to use the cameras. We have AI on the edge, which is some of the functionality that One Beyond brought to Crestron, which you probably ought to mention. You probably ought to talk to Brad about that, because that's something that I think is substantial. Because then we're moving. There's a security issue that's substantial there, but there's also a processing issue that's substantial there. And then because we're a Microsoft campus, we have access to all the Copilot stuff. So therefore, students not only can have the recordings, but they can actually get the notes, and they can actually translate those notes. They can actually use those notes as part of the test. For those of us who've embraced AI, there's still some fear of cheating and stuff. But the fact of the matter is, Gen Z is going to use AI in the professional world. So if we say to them, well, you can't use it in the educational world because we're afraid you're going to cheat, then we have a problem. Yeah. But that's beside the point. But that's just some examples. And I think at some point in time, Brad ought to talk about that AI on the edge and some of the stuff that one does. Actually, Marion referenced one thing that you can do with cameras with regard to shooting whiteboards in a room.
Right. I think that's it's interesting because Marion gave great examples about the application of AI that aren't generative AI. Right. Mm-hmm. Everybody right now is certainly inspired and enamored with the generative AI capabilities, things like Copilot, ChatGPT, Claude, all those other tools. And that's where we see it does feel like magic. I put in a prompt and out comes a video and some imagery. That's really exciting. But there are so many other applications of AI that aren't generative AI. And things like an intelligent video, some of that we have within One Beyond that's embedded in the camera. Within meeting rooms, we have intelligent switching just with 2 cameras, and you can intelligently switch from the back of the room to the front of the room. That way you're following the conversation, and those that are remote are seeing the right view of the meeting to stay engaged. or it's a system with multiple cameras, right? If you turn your face, hey, a different camera angle is probably better to show the front side of that face. Intelligently switch to that. So those are some of those capabilities. We don't offer this today, but an application that I've seen within EDU, which I found very interesting, was a request so that the professor up teaching has a monitor showing him, and whenever there's a student that is disengaged, show that on camera to the professor, right? And that's an input for them to adjust their the lecture that they're delivering. Maybe they call on that student. Maybe they get more animated, right? That provides some input, and that's the capabilities of AI embedded technology delivering that into the classroom. And I think that's really interesting. But we are so early in this revolution. We're going to see a lot more of those really interesting innovations and applications of AI come out to all of these different solutions.
That actually is a great example of a software feature that can be easily added. And that's why you need to put multiple cameras in the room, because you shouldn't just have a camera shooting the professor. Yeah. We do this already with remote learning. If you think about remote learning, we look at what's called dwell time, which is them, are they looking at the screen or not? Are they missing? And from that point in time, we can actually tell, with dwell time, whether they're paying attention and, or maybe distracted. And that's going to probably give you an idea how the student's going to perform. If you had the same, that example Brad just gave you is phenomenal, because most professors don't want the students to fail. Most want to know when there's a problem or when they are tuned out. And having that would be a nice feature, especially when you have a large lecture hall. And the key here is actually putting in the equipment to make it happen, right? I mean, that's a great example of something that probably is just going to be added to Copilot as just a regular old feature that it'll be somebody else comes up with for a different example, Brad, but then all you're doing is activating it for the professor. And by the way, that can be activated. You don't have to have a monitor. You can put that on the mobile device, right? I mean, it's connected to the network. Put that on the mobile device, and you just give them the name of the student and say,
imagine an automatic spotlight, just like light.
There are some techniques there. I learned early on in my teaching that when you have a student that talks a lot, you just go stand behind him or her and continue lecturing, and they stop talking. So there are some things like that you can do, Brad. But I don't know if a spotlight would be the best thing to do for a student.
I mean, there's a simple command control. You could use DMX, and not to make this a command, control conversation. Anyhow, if you have questions for our fine guests, go to the right-hand side, type them in, and we'll get to them here in about 10 or so minutes. Maren, really quickly, what are some best practices when it comes to bringing in collaboration and bringing in AI into your organization for meetings, for sharing documents, and for kind of getting everybody involved?
Well, I would, being at Microsoft, I think Copilot is a pretty important piece to that. I would actively promote you, if you haven't already, through the 45 minutes that we heard today. Try to introduce that to your organization. I think it's important to promote healthy meeting engagement. It's funny because I feel like I've gotten so spoiled over the years. Being at Microsoft, we have most of the people join with their faces on camera all the time. But I think it's really gotten interesting over the years, like back in the day where you were multitasking and you could join these meetings with your camera off, and I'm doing a bunch of things and taking notes. Like, I have no excuse anymore. Like, something's taking the notes for me now. I can look at you face to face. Like, there's really no reason for me not to engage with you personally. So I think we've really upped the level of our engagement and the way to be personally connected. I think that's one of the biggest issues that a lot of companies are complaining about. If people feel disconnected from their organization, I don't feel like I've got the relationships that I need. And I think all these things that we do with camera and video and being able to be seen and heard, like, it really does add a lot of value. So I think it's promoting a culture of making sure that people have the technology in use at all times, and then really evaluating the experiences that you want to give people within your organizations. We say a lot of times you've got to earn the commute. There are moments that these really intentional in-person / hybrid meetings are absolutely necessary, and having those be really rich experiences that give you new ways to collaborate and share ideas. Like, this is going to be a way to competitively up-level organizations across the board. If you're stuck in the day where you can't see people and they're off camera, like, you're way behind the times and they're not taking notes on your behalf. Like, this is a modern way of doing meetings. So we've talked a lot about helping organizations come up with their meeting modernization path or their office modernization plan. That's not something that's going to happen in the next 6 months, but like, let's come up with a 5-year plan of how are we going to outfit all of your buildings to be more embracing of this modern approach. What's your technology stack? How are you evaluating when people come to the office or when they don't? What are your meeting styles? What are your cadences for these? Like, I think that's it's a really important time to put a lot of thought into that as organizations and what our plan is going to be. And then who are our stakeholders, as Gary said, like who are our champions within the organization that are giving us feedback on how are things going, looking at the data for how things are being used is important. Data is always king, I would say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Brad, same question. Is what's some best practices from your perspective?
Yeah, I think that one of the things we've repeated several times is that we're on the beginning of this new AI era, which means it will continue to rapidly change. Look at Gary mentioned the rapid way Microsoft has continually enhanced Copilot and released new AI features. So one, invest in technology platforms that continue to grow and expand with you, and that can be used in multiple places, right? If you choose a point solution that can only work in a certain size meeting room, that means you need to pick different point solutions for all the other meeting rooms. And so choose a platform that you can standardize on and then expand to all of your meeting spaces, so you can limit the number of technology platforms you actually have to support. That's an important one. Second is make sure you're using certified hardware, because that's what is required to continue to evolve as the platforms do as well. That's really important. And then the other considerations are make sure that the technology you bring is suited for the room, right? Even while sticking to the other first two tenets, make sure that you have the right kind of an experience, whether it's a small room, a large room, a lecture hall. They have different requirements for AV, and this is something that we've all wrestled with for a very long time, but that still remains true. And so make sure that you're delivering on that, because if you have a poor audio experience in a room, then not only do the remote people have a poor experience, but also you can't drive the AI experience very well either, right? If Copilot can't hear you, then it can't transcribe and can't summarize the meeting well. And so the importance of having the right technology in the room becomes really paramount as you bring some of these tools in. So I think those are really important considerations that we've been wrestling with. It's just a new pressure on delivering the right solution now.
Nothing like a little pressure. Mr. K, from an education standpoint, what are some best practices for bringing in remote learning? Like we said, it's two sides of the same coin, but how do you bring that in, and some best practices for deploying it and getting those champions?
Well, actually, I'm going to answer a slightly different way. I'm going to say that the most important thing today with regard to adopting AI and AV in any space is going AV over IP. The time is past. We need to stop building systems the old-fashioned way. You got to put this stuff on the network. You lose control when it's not on the network, and you're losing all this ability to do a bunch of other stuff to rooms, to facilities, by not putting them on the network. Like, for example, streaming out content on the fly. If you're not AV over IP, that is expensive and complicated to do, but yet it's on the fly if you're AV over IP. So I think that any organization that's on this needs to look at that first and foremost, because these AI features that Marion's talking about, a lot of them you'll lose if all the devices aren't connected to the network. Because, for example, we still have to keep these rooms operating and make it where the people can use them really simply. And we're going to have this ability to, through presence sensing, for example, not just sensing somebody walked in the room, sensing who walked in the room. Now, some places like San Francisco, you might have to wait a while for that because they have laws around that. But for the rest of the country, we're going to be able to make it where we are identifying you by numerous other ways, whether it's the laptop you're carrying, it's the watch that you're wearing, or the phone that you're carrying. And we're going to know who you are. And therefore, that company's going to say, well, you're employed by us, so we're going to know that this is you in a room, and we're going to turn the room on and make it look just like the room you normally present in, even though you're not presenting in that room today. We'll make it operate exactly the same. You can't do that if you're not AV over IP. So that's the first thing. The second is, I agree with Brad 100%. Make investment in the right gear. Make investment in the stuff that can be upgraded. Make sure you're looking and asking, can we do not just software upgrades, right? But can we do firmware upgrades to this product? Because what ends up happening is that a new feature comes along, great, that's software, but a new compatibility comes along, that's firmware. So for example, adding NDI to a space, that becomes a lot easier if you're AV over IP and if you can do firmware updates on products. And then how are you going to manage that? Like, what is the platform you're going to use to manage it? There's a bunch of different ways to do it, but we can't do it the way we manage a printer. And our, as much as we would love to think that we're going to manage gear in the future, and maybe Brad will disagree with me on this, but I don't think it'll be managed like a printer, because a printer, we really only need to know 5 things about a printer. But when you're talking about a camera in a room, we don't need to just know if it's on the network and if it's showing the video. We need to know what's happening even when it's not operating. And by the way, we're also looking at the content that's there. The printer, we generally aren't doing that with. So I think those are some pieces of advice. And I think we held back as an industry and have been afraid to kind of go AV over IP, been afraid to embrace some of this new technology, but we need to go head in and invest.
Well, and if I can just pile on with that one too, is that there's another very important consideration. Well, there's 2. One is the open ecosystem, so that you can support a wide variety of technologies, right? But if you are just locked into one kind of proprietary ecosystem, then your choices are limited. So you need that open ecosystem so that you can connect a variety of devices and get value out of them. That's super important. But then the next one is you have to consider scale. And I think that education wrestled with this before enterprise in a way, right? Because they had to connect far more lecture halls, and corporations could be a little more selective on their meeting rooms. That was the past. Now you have to worry about the scale. You have to worry about connecting all of those rooms. And so those technology platforms that you choose are very important, right? We have customers that have many thousands of endpoints for their AV over IP systems. That is typical, and that will continue to be typical. And so if you are rate limited to only a couple hundred endpoints on one particular technology platform, that's not the right one to choose, right? And so scale considerations are another really important one as you're thinking about your future.
All right. We've got a couple questions here. Let's get to those. First one is, how can AI-enabled AV systems enhance collaboration between remote and in-person participants in hybrid scenarios?
I mean, I think Marion did a phenomenal job talking about some of the functionalities that they've added into Copilot. But I think that some of that probably cannot be solved yet, but it will be. That's the thing. If you're doing what Brad just said, it will be, and you'll have the ability to do that upgrade to make that solvable, which is, as an example, let me give you a specific example, Craig. All the people that are entering those meetings have cameras on their devices. We're just not using them yet, but we're about to. You watch. At InfoComm, you're going to see some really cool technologies where they're seaming all the cameras in the rooms together that are on the laptops, that you say yes or no. And then now we have all these different views that we can take advantage. But if they're not on the network, it ain't going to happen. So therefore, that's an example. AI is going to do that. So imagine everyone's in a room with a laptop. They have the laptop. They all have cameras in there. You're now able to use those cameras. That's going to be a giant step up in the way that we see meetings and the way that we view meetings. And then we can seam that together with the One Beyond stuff that Brad was talking about. Imagine like what Crestron is going to be able to do with that. And then the data you're going to get from that. Because if we now are using laptops owned by the company, we actually own the data that's on those laptops too, so we can see what they're doing. And now we don't have to just put a spotlight on a person that's that's not paying attention in a classroom, Brad. We actually have the ability to make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yep.
All right, Marion, what's your take on that?
There was one, I think we've touched on all of them. There's one that I think is incredibly valuable, and I use it every day, is you need to register your voice and your face. If you're in Teams and you're using Copilot, that's a really important feature, not even just for being able to have attribution of like, hey, I was there and this is what I said. When I'm just speaking in general, like there's voice isolation. So I have like 2 cats going crazy outside of my house that even if you're in an airport, whatever else, voice isolation is an amazing benefit that will help drown out all the rest of the noise. It's going to focus on you and your voice. and help people focus on what's important. So that's something that we didn't touch on. That is AI kind of doing things behind the scenes. And then the other one, I absolutely, from a Crestron point of view and what's happening with One Beyond, I think the ability to get multiple camera streams and different views of the room. Once you have that experience, it's hard to go back. There's going to be an up-leveling of expectations once we introduce these new technologies into these spaces and having these different views. So be prepared for that. I think there's a lot of interest. We're selling a lot of different camera technology into rooms these days. And a lot of it is just upgrading the rooms with multiple cameras. So that's going to be an exciting, I'd say, next 2 years of seeing the camera technology just sort of explode into the meeting space is one that's exciting to watch. So excited for Crestron and what you guys are bringing.
Brad, really quickly, let's take one last question here. We've got like a minute so left. How do you get the IT department on board?
This has been a perennial question in our industry.
It is, and it may take longer than 2 minutes, so that's okay.
No, this will continue to be something that we have to work really closely with. It is a very important department, right? There's a reason that they have a say in this, to protect and enable the organization. Right. There are a couple of things that you have to really do, and others can chime in where we need to. One is choose technology that is secure by design. And that is really important to help the IT departments feel that they're making a good choice by connecting these devices to the network, right? Deploy them with tools that are designed for IT departments. That includes the management and the monitoring, right? And built on standards that the IT department understands and values and really appreciates. Those are just the block and tackling that we've been working on with our industry for quite some time too. Gary?
I was going to say one big hole here is education. I think that, and I have a lot of experience with talking to IT people that literally did not know that video doesn't have to take up the majority of the network. They literally think that when they think video, think giant bandwidth and all sorts of problems with the network. And it hasn't dawned on them that every time they get on a Teams meeting, you're talking about some pretty high resolution video traveling across the network all of the time, and they don't really think twice about it. Right. By the way, putting a PowerPoint presentation on a network is a lot less bandwidth than that. So therefore, if you're doing Teams, you can do everything else that you need to do audio and video on a network. And I think it just comes down to education. I love this question from Eric. And I think it comes down to partnering with the IT department and saying, look, will you just give me an hour so I can educate you? Now, I don't know, Brett, years ago, you guys had a guide on how to talk to IT people and do you still have that guide? Does that thing still exist?
We do. It's on the site because the content is still relevant. I mean, the basic principles are true. And so that is a very important part of it. I think that also the AV integrators have become network experts as well. And so it's good to see that we've all evolved to be able to have that conversation and to partner with our IT departments. I think the other thing that we can and should embrace is that, and this is, I can't remember whether it was Microsoft data or say Frost and Sullivan, but top down, right? These AI initiatives, these collaboration initiatives, they're coming from the top down. Yeah. Right? And so in many ways, we can partner with IT to address what's on their plate to solve too. And so that's a good thing that's there. The other side of that data too is that department heads are demanding and asking for this as well. So in many ways, as we come to the IT department with IT approved solutions, we actually help solve their problem. And so that's one way to partner with IT is by showing them how we can do it in a way that they can understand and value and appreciate.
All right. Thanks, guys, so much. Marion Corrigan from Microsoft, thank you.
Yeah.
Gary Kay, thank you, sir. Thanks for letting me take over. Brad Hensey.
You did a phenomenal job.
Gary, go ahead and take us out because I actually.
Well, I was just going to say, don't forget. I mean, look, this is encapsulated in time. We just did an hour and 2 minutes. That happens to be an hour and 2 minutes. It's real time. This will live on forever. You have the ability to send. We're gonna push this out on social media. Obviously, we'll put links in AV Buyers Club, but also in AV Nation. But you have the ability to actually have anyone that you can think of in your organization that should see this, or any of your friends that you go to different shows with and events. You need to share this. They need to understand that this is not something that should be filled with fear, but filled with opportunity. And just have them watch this. So I hope that you'll share it with us, and those of you who joined, and we really appreciate you joining. And Tim, you did a phenomenal job hosting this. I want to thank Carrie, our producer in the background, and Justin for helping to put this together today as well. So thank you very much for joining.